How you doing, folks? I am chilling Johnny casual style, going for a little drive. First of all, the first thing I want to say is I have been remiss in, I told Troy on time that I would give a shout out to his channel. He didn't ask for it, but I liked what he does, or I like what he does, not past tense. And I want to support new channels. He just started up several weeks ago. He's got a few videos up. He does some really nice reviews. He's a mellow guy. Definitely gets the Johnny Casual seal of approval so far. You know, I generally don't, I don't like to list my favorite channels. I don't like to, because it's like when you go up to accept an award, you're always going to leave someone out. So I don't really like to say, what are my favorite channels and that sort of thing. And to be honest, I think everyone, or almost everyone, has something to offer. It's nice. I like the fact that the watch community on YouTube is so diverse. There's such a diversity of voices, and everyone has a place. Everyone's part of this crazy hobby and obsession. And even though I disagree with the approaches of some, or I don't agree with the ideology or whatever, I like the fact that we're all there, that there is this array of different ways and approaches, and it's richer for it. Think of how boring, it would be if everyone was like taking one approach, right? So anyways, Troy on time, go check out his channel, see if he's done a couple reviews. I think he has a Waltham, or he has some sort of vintage watch. I can't remember what it is. I don't know where he's going with his channel, but it's definitely worth checking out. I'm hoping Purple Haze 5995 does more videos. He started a channel up a couple weeks ago, but I don't know if he's really going to do the channel thing or not. So yeah, anyways, on a different matter, Mr. McMahon, in his, I think it was most recent video, he was talking about people proselytizing about their watch tastes. And his video showed several of his Japanese watches, and Jeff really likes his Japanese watches. I think part of the reason he likes it, if I may be so bold, you can disagree with me, of course, Jeff, is that in the range that Jeff is comfortable spending, that sort of $500 to $1,000 range, or under $1,000 range, you get a lot from the Japanese brands. I feel that if you're spending less than about $1,000 on the new market, that Japanese is the way to go. The Citizen Signature line, which you can find used for as little as $300, and they range up to $800-900 new. They make some great watches. Jeff Citizen Grand Touring, some of the Japanese domestic market ones like the ProMaster Skies that he has, the Seiko Sumo, the Tuna, the Orient Saturation Diver is a little bit more expensive, but there's a lot of good stuff coming from Japan, and of course the micro brands as well, like Benares, which Jeff likes. I had that Zixin, which to me was like the king of the micro divers. I love that watch. Just a little too big and hulky for me. Armida, there's a bunch of Hexa, Helson, bunch of good micro divers. You're not going to get the same refinement in a $600 micro diver as you will even in a $1,000 Oris. I noticed a big jump from the micro divers to these $1,000 watches. And there is, I have my tier system, and I'm kind of, tier 3 has the widest range. I was tempted to really split it, but I feel like I have to stick with the structure. But I'm actually going to expand it. I think tier 3 is really around 500 to about 3,000. So that's a huge range, and that's the mid-range. And by mid-range, what people mean is it's the mid-range between kind of cheap/affordable watches and luxury watches. And the definitive mid-range brand, in my opinion, is probably Tag Heuer. They're more upper mid-range, but they really start around, I think you can get some quartz tags in the new market for $700–800. Longines is another definitive mid-range brand, tier 3 brand. Baume & Mercier. And then you have some of the higher end fashion brands like Raymond Weil, as Don calls it. Raymond Weil. Oris. Hamilton's on the lower side. But I think you could take the mid-range and you could split that into the lower mid-range, which is the 500 to maybe 1500 range, and then the 1500 to 3000, because there's some distinct qualitative differences. But I think part of the problem is that the lower mid-range stuff is probably better bang for buck. Like, for instance, you know, the Citizen Signature line, Jeff's Citizen Grand Touring. That's a watch that new costs around $700, $750, and used it costs around $500. And you're getting a pretty nice watch for that money. You know, you're getting a watch that really could fit in with Swiss watches that are like twice its cost. To me, the Citizen Grand Touring looks like it looks comparable to you know, a Baume & Mercier that's $1,500, or you know, that sort of thing, a Longines. So I think that's why Jeff is one of the reasons. I think he also is attracted to the Japanese aesthetic. But then Richard Stevens, who probably, if you have a video channel, you know who Richard Stevens is. He's all over the place. Richard Stevens is ubiquitous. He commented that, I forget how he phrased it. It was something like, "No offense, but there's just something about, there's something lacking in those Japanese watches that they don't have the fit finish or the X factor of the Swiss watches." And then somebody else, I can't remember who it was, commented and said, "That's just the sort of brand marketing that you're buying into." And my sense is that it's both. That I actually agree with Richard, and it's hard to exactly pinpoint what it is beyond fit and finish. But there's something about the aesthetic that you get. Like, I mean, I felt this when I was into those lower mid-range watches, Japanese watches, micro diver watches, and then I got my Oris diver's date, and it felt like I was entering a different world, right? It felt like it was the world of Swiss watches, and there was a jewel-like quality, a fit and finish to it, an aesthetic, a design that for me, the Japanese and the micro divers just didn't have. They couldn't match it. Now that said, I'm very curious about a higher end Japanese watch. I've never owned, the highest end Japanese watch I've owned is the Orient Saturation Diver, which I think the retail price is like $1,800, but really it's an $1,000 watch. You know, I think when we talk about the prices of a watch, we really have to look at the gray market, because that's the going rate. I know that retail is more, but how many people spend $1,800 on an Orient Saturation Diver? How many people actually spend $6,200 on an Omega Planet Ocean? Even if you go into an authorized dealer, you're going to get a discount off that. Joma Shop sells them for $4,000. To me, the Omega Planet Ocean is a $4,000 watch. I'm not comparing it to $6,000 watches. So the Orient Saturation Diver is what I'm trying to get at. I really see it as an $1,000 watch. Now, I didn't feel like it didn't have the same fit and finish as the Oris. It was lacking that X factor. It was a nice watch, but it didn't quite have it. And I don't know if that's just sort of an aesthetic that I buy into, you know, that I like. I mean, in some ways it reminds me a little bit of Japanese cars versus European cars. Not all European cars, I'm talking about Audi and BMW and even Volkswagen a little bit. That there's, you know, an Audi or a BMW, just the aesthetic to me is just more refined by and large than you'll get even on the higher end Japanese watches, the Lexuses and so forth, Acuras. that might just be personal. That might just be, I mean, how could it not be in a way? You know, how could it be anything but just individual taste? On the other hand, I agree with the other guy. I forget, again, I apologize for forgetting who it was, that a good dose of that is the brand mystique, that there's something about buying a Swiss watch. There's something about the brand name, and it's hard to get around that. I mean, right now, I'll be honest, a while ago, maybe a year or so, I was considering shopping for a replica Planet Ocean. And I did some research into replicas. I looked on the forums, I looked at the different shops. I was looking into it. I was like, you know, I don't really, you know, I didn't have the moral qualms because it was sort of like, you know, it felt a little iffy. I didn't really love it. But I was thinking, you know, Omega's a big company. They're not really suffering that much from it. So I was curious, though, about what was the quality? What was the quality comparison? And the Omega Planet Ocean in particular is one that I, as far as I can tell, the replicas have really they've done well with. That the case, the finish, just the whole thing, it's almost like you're getting 80% of a Planet, 80 to 90% of a Planet Ocean, but it's $300 versus $4,000. So there's a couple key differences. There's subtle little differences. Sometimes the lume pips aren't aligned perfectly. I don't know about the finish, but visually they look really good. One of the big differences that they obviously can't copy the movement. So with the open case back, you're getting a very different movement. You're getting like a clone of a Swiss ETA movement. So it's not even a real Swiss ETA movement. It's a Chinese clone, meaning they basically copy the movement. And there's no finishing. So it's kind of odd having a Planet Ocean with this really simple $200 watch movement. They're also prone to have issues, you know. But regardless, my point of bringing this up, I didn't do it. I didn't get a Planet Ocean wrap. I didn't want to do it. It just didn't feel right. It felt like it's a fake, right? I don't have a problem with homages. I would buy an homage if I really wanted it. But a replica, it feels like you're pretending you're something that you're not. And so there's that element. But the other element that's specific to this, what I was talking about before, is that even if you get like 90% of the visual tactile experience from a replica, that little extra 10% becomes huge. It becomes everything in a way. It becomes like, oh, this is, oh, you know, it's almost like a synthetic woman, right? We're going to see this in our lives as they come out with artificial intelligence and they develop robotics and so forth. You know, one of the first things, you know, it's like with the internet, the thing that blossomed first was porn, right? So the sex industry is gonna partially drive this, or at least we'll see the innovations there. So we will see sex robots. It will happen. I'm sure the Japanese are already working on it. I'm sure they're already doing research. So it's gonna happen. And but I mean, even if you have a physically, if it's 98% real, there's no person there. There's no soul, right? There's no whatever you believe in as far as your your ontology, what you believe in terms of religion. There's still a person, right? There's somebody, there's a human being. And it's almost like, even though the physical, actually, I don't know if anyone's seen the TV show Humans. I think it's either British or is based on a British series, but it's about an alternate present where there are androids. And there's one scene where you know, you have like a house android and they look completely human except they have these bright green eyes. And everyone has like a house human to like do the dishes and take care of the kids and do the shit that we don't want to do. But the male, the man of the house, they're having marriage problems, and at one point, of course, their android is really hot, And he looks into, there's a little booklet for adult options where you can turn on an adult program where they simulate sexuality. So he does that one night, and he has sex with the android. I just spoiled the show if you haven't seen it. But it's an interesting thing to think about, because it's like this is a dilemma that in not just in terms of sexuality, but the simulated experience. I know a lot of kids, younger people there's these online virtual spaces that aren't sexual. Is it not Half-Life? That might be a video game. But there are these online like virtual lives that people live. And how satisfying can that be? Yet people, it's like a surrogate. So that's the same thing with a replica. And that again, I kind of veered way away from what I was originally talking about. Yeah, I don't know how I was connecting this to Japanese watches versus Swiss watches. I think there's just something about the authenticity. It even goes beyond brand. It goes beyond, there's just a quality, and it's hard to pinpoint. I mean, certainly this watch here has fit and finish and design and architecture, and it's just a superior piece than any Japanese watch I've seen. I'm assuming, got cut off there. I should finish that thought. It's ideally towards your own greater freedom. It's not towards you following a lockstep program of what sort of watches you should buy, for instance. It's towards your own greater freedom. It's towards you connecting with your own sense of self and your own taste and developing that. And I think this is something that's hard for people to do. Conformity is easier. So that's why people ask people like R2 Luxury, which watch should I buy? Should I get this one or that one? And it's interesting because oftentimes I've even seen people ask other people this, like, should I get this one or this one? I really like this one, but I've heard this one's good. And if that person recommends, well, the good one, then they end up getting that. And to me, it's like, go with what you really like. Not necessarily whimsically. I think this is where we have to be careful, because our first impression, our whimsical desire for something, I think you need to sit with it. You need to rest with it for a while. See if it holds you for a while. But ultimately, we're all unique, different people. Not everyone. I'm not out there saying everyone should own an Omega. I don't think Omega's for everyone. It doesn't need to be for everyone. I love Omega. I think that their designs are beautiful. And this is why people have asked me, why do you do so many videos on Rolex if you don't like Rolex? Clearly, you just secretly love Rolex. One of the reasons I do a lot of videos on Rolex is because I get so much shit from people about Rolex. In the comments, people reply and say, I get more thumbs down when I make negative comments about Rolex, I've noticed. I get more comments from people saying, you'll get there eventually. You'll get to Rolex eventually. Oh, I used to think like you used to. Actually, no one's really said it quite like that, but I definitely have a lot of it happens almost quite frequently. Because there's this idea out there that all roads lead to Rolex. It's what the funnel I was talking about. All roads lead to Rolex, and then from Rolex it's Patek. And how boring is that? There's nothing wrong with liking Rolex or Patek Philippe. What's wrong is the idea that everyone needs to do it that way. To me, that's ridiculous. That's uniformity. It's boring. If there was a Rolex I absolutely loved, I would put it on my wish list. There just isn't one. There's not a Rolex that I look at and say, that's a watch I need to own someday. There's not a single one. There are some Rolexes that I like. There's quite a few that I like. There's some I like a lot, but there's none that are just like, I have to have that, right? And that's what guides me as far as like a watch. What else possibly could, except your own desires, your own tastes, right? Forget all the rest. Follow your own. I mean, it's really about saying yes to yourself. You know what I mean? Like saying, yes, I do have trust in my own taste and my own interests. And then you develop that. And maybe you start off crudely. But that's why I think it's good to start small. If you're getting into watches, start with the tier 2 watches. Start with the Seikos and Citizens and Tissot and Victorinox and that sort of thing. and figure out what you like. And then as you develop your palate, your own personal individual taste, then start, and as you can afford it, start getting nicer and nicer pieces. You do get more with the more money you spend. As a general rule, there is a reason why it's more expensive. It's not just it is diminishing returns in some ways, but you are getting. There's a reason that some watches are more expensive than others, right? Early on, for the first few $1,000s, most of the change is in the actual physical craftsmanship of the watch, the fit and finish, the design, and then it becomes more about brand and movement and materials used. So for me, because I do care about the movement, but I don't care about it like Don Haynes does. Don Haynes has that engineering mind. I'm more of an artistic mind, where the aesthetics, the whole experience of the watch as a visual, tactile object is what is mostly important to me. It's not necessarily more superficial, it's more aesthetic oriented, it's more artistic oriented. The engineering is more the mechanics, it's more the how it works. And that's really cool. I definitely have a lot of respect. I go to Don Haynes for my questions about movements because he knows so much. He's a true movement guru, and I hope he does more videos on that sort of thing. But that's another variation of that. If you don't really care about movements, then you start peaking out around the tier 4 to 5 range. There's no point to go beyond that, because you're going to get an amazing array of designed watches in the tier 4 to 5 range. And unless you care about the status or the movement or the brand name, and a lot of people do. So then you do start moving up. Anyways, I need to get towards other productive things. Not that this is totally non-productive, but I am definitely rambling, and it's like following, just little paths, and I can go all over the place. All right, I'll talk to you folks later. And approaches, and it's richer for it. Think of how boring, it would be if everyone was like taking one approach, right? So. Anyways, Troy on Time, go check out his channel. See if he's done a couple reviews. I think he has a Waltham, or he has some sort of vintage watch. I can't remember what it is. I don't know where he's going with his channel, but it's definitely worth checking out. I'm hoping Purple Haze 5995 does more videos. He started a channel up a couple weeks ago, but I don't know if he's really going to do the channel thing or not. So yeah, anyways, on a different matter, Mr. McMahon, in I think it was most recent video, he was talking about people proselytizing about their watch tastes. And his video showed several of his Japanese watches, and Jeff really likes his Japanese watches. I think part of the reason he likes... How you doing, folks? I am chilling Johnny casual style, going for a little drive. First of all, the first thing I want to say is I have been remiss in... I told Troy on Time that I would give a shout out to his channel. He didn't ask for it, but I liked what he does, or I like what he does, not past tense. And I want to support new channels. He just started up several weeks ago and has something to offer. It's nice. I like the fact that the watch community on YouTube is so diverse. There's such a diversity of voices, and everyone has a place. Everyone's part of this crazy hobby and obsession. And even though I disagree with the approaches of some, or I don't agree with the ideology or whatever, I like the fact that we're all there, that there is this array of different ways. And so he's got a few videos up. He does some really nice reviews. He's a mellow guy. Definitely gets the Johnny Casual seal of approval so far. I generally don't, I don't like to list my favorite channels. I don't like to, because it's like when you go up to accept an award, you're always going to leave someone out. So I don't really like to say, what are my favorite channels and that sort of thing. And to be honest, I think everyone or almost everyone.